We've got the last couple of folks that are coming in. I'm going to go ahead and go over a couple of administrative items. Hey, who's got one of these? Or something that looks kind of like it? So let's do ourselves a favor right now and turn the ringers off, right? Or turn it off. Because I'm telling you right now, ladies and gentlemen, while your registration costs cover the chair that you're sitting in right now, you're only going to need the edge, okay? Because this is electrifying, okay? Electrifying, okay? I got to go over a couple other admin items, okay? So this is, if you've sat through an SAME brief before, right, this is where the moderator becomes the head flight attendant. So in the event of an emergency, there are doors to my front, your rear. If you see me run, and I don't run quick anymore, it would be good if you got up and moved quickly, right, to one of the exits, because we'll need to vacate the premises. There's also some exits up here for, in all seriousness, for some of the folks that are sitting in the front rows. That pretty much covers that piece. I believe these slides are going to be posted on the website afterwards. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Lovell, retired, one each, former Army engineer officer and veteran of the mighty Northwest Division. And I am extremely humbled and honored to be here again this year to moderate the Hydropower panel with fellow veterans, patriots, and dedicated professionals to our society and to our nation here. General Hemlinger's not going to like this very much, but we put a special request in for his former boss, Colonel Jeff Wagenhurst, to be here today to help us evaluate his presentation skills. And I've had the opportunity to actually serve with General Hemlinger when he commanded the 14th Engineer Battalion, Rugged, during Iraq almost 10 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished panel is made up of Lieutenant Colonel retired Ruth Ann Hayter, who's the Chief of Contracting at the mighty Walla Walla District, is an Army veteran with 26 years in the Acquisition Corps. She's joined by Sean Worthington, who's the Asset Investment Program Manager. Sean serves 3 separate agencies in his position, including the Bonneville Power Authority, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and the Bureau of Reclamation as managing capital hydropower program in the northwestern United States. He has significant experience in both in the United States Army Corps of Engineers and in the private sector. Mr. Scott Shelley is the Northwest Division Small Business Assistant Director. He has over 40 years of experience with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation in contracting and small business professions. He is an acquisition professional with significant experience on hydropower-related acquisitions. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we are very pleased and honored to have Brigadier General Pete Hemlinger, who has over 30 years of service to our nation, both in peacetime and in combat, 11 years of service with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He is currently the commander of the Northwestern Division, and previous to this assignment, he commanded the South Pacific Division. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in a warm round of applause for our panelists.
All right. Hey, Kevin, thank you very much for those electrifying introduction there. I'll try to avoid the hydropower puns during the rest of this morning. But it's really a pleasure to join you all today, to be joined by this great panel from the Northwestern Division, and to see all of you here today. And as Kevin pointed out, it's really an honor to see Colonel Retired Jeff Wagenhurst here, who will retire from his second career tomorrow. Is that correct? From his second career in industry. So sir, thank you for your long service and to the nation. All right. So now we've done introductions. Right now, you know a little bit about myself and our panel members that are here today. I'm looking at the audience, and I want to find out a little more about you. And so I want to just ask. So if you are here from industry, from a small business, large business, if you do not get your paycheck directly from the federal government, please raise your hand. Okay, all right, thank you. This presentation is for you, and I don't want to shortchange it. It reminds me of the story, even though, I mean, we've got a lot of empty seats here, but we really want to make sure that you're getting the information that you need, so this is worth your time investment to be here today. I want to answer your questions. I want to provide you opportunity to get all the information that you need. And Kevin did mention to turn off your cell phones, but I would tell you to turn your cameras on. You're going to see some slides here towards the end. I call them the Show Me the Money slides, and that really specifically shows where we have future projects in the next few years by region or district within the Corps of Engineers. So we'll cycle through those at the end. Don't be bashful to take pictures of the slides that we run through here, and then I know SAME at the end of the conference, if they have not already, will make those available to everybody. But again, I don't want to shortchange what we present with you here today. All right, so I've got some other team members that are with us today that did not raise their hands, and I just want to briefly introduce their leadership. We have 5 districts within the Northwestern Division. So here representing the Omaha District is Colonel John Hudson. Representing the Kansas City District is Colonel Doug Guttormson. Representing the Walla Walla District is Lieutenant Colonel Christian Dietz. Representing the Portland District is Colonel Aaron Dorff. Representing the Seattle District is Damon Lilly, the Director of Program Management within the district. And then also representing the Hydroelectric Design Center is Stephen Miles. Okay, so just some quick background right there. So I want to share some background on the Corps' hydropower mission, share with you trends we're seeing with the hydropower industry, and also let you know what we're doing to overcome some of the challenges that we're facing as we aim to maintain a reliable hydropower program and highlight areas where we see greater cooperation and collaboration business opportunities. All right, the Corps of Engineers is the largest owner-operator of hydroelectric power plants in the United States and is one of the largest in the world. The Corps of Engineers has 75 plants that have a total installed capacity of 20,600 megawatts and produces nearly 100 billion kilowatt hours a year. This is nearly a third of the nation's total hydropower output. That's enough energy to serve about 10 million households, or roughly 10 cities the size of Seattle, Washington. Over the years, Congress has directed the Corps to build water resource projects that serve public needs, such as flood control, water supply, and navigation. And where feasible, our dams provide a hydropower benefit. Hydropower plants capture the energy of flowing water to generate electricity. Each hydropower project in the Corps of Engineers is unique. We have a total of 376 generating units at our 75 hydropower dams. The projects range in age and output capacity, with our oldest projects dating back to the 1930s and an overall average age of our assets of 50 years. So based on the age of our infrastructure, and we have a lot of opportunities. Within Northwestern Division, the average age of our generators is 59 years. As with everything, age impacts the reliability and the readiness to generate power. We're doing a lot of work in our powerhouses, and I love this cutout to see all the internal workings of our generators and the powertrain. Rehabilitation projects are aimed at improving the condition of our turbines, generators, and other powertrain equipment, as well as reduce power plant outages. However, even repairs can cause outages that can affect other project purposes, especially during years when above normal precipitation requires higher water releases. Just this year, scheduled outages at a few of our Missouri River main stem dams required releasing water through outlet works or spillways instead of through the powerhouse. The investments in rehabilitation projects are important for us, our power marketing partners, and local communities. Auxiliary equipment in our powerhouses need attention as well. This includes cranes, because they enable work on powerhouse equipment and must be fully operational before any other major work in the powerhouses can occur, and also includes work on switchgears and battery systems that provide the lifeblood of our plants. Keeping this equipment in good operating condition is our goal to ensure we accomplish our hydropower mission. All right, so we have lots of opportunities for hydropower upgrades. That's how we keep our equipment in good condition. You may be wondering, how do we decide whether or when to make repairs or to replace something, and how do we acquire upcoming work? A 50-year-old crane that operates outside likely requires replacement versus repair. But sometimes outage considerations, cost, and other risks will be a factor in determining a replacement instead of an upgrade or rehabilitation. Often the first step is to advertise supply contracts to acquire hydropower equipment, such as transformers or turbines, then subsequent construction contracts to install equipment are awarded. In other cases, the Corps may award hydropower major supply contracts that include separate construction installation requirements. And finally, in some cases, the Corps may award major hydropower-related construction contracts that include significant hydropower equipment. As part of acquisition planning, we conduct market research to decide two things. First, whether we will set aside any portion for small business, and second, to determine subcontracting opportunities for small businesses. I want to talk about long-range planning. We understand the importance of these, how important these investments are to prepare our hydropower plants for future generations. I want to tout the importance of success of the Federal Hydropower Modernization Initiative, or HMI. This tool helps us analyze and prioritize investments. Through working closely across federal hydropower agencies, industry partners, and power market agencies, we're developing better long-term management strategies that are based on economic and risk principles. This strategy will enable a long-term master plan that provides stakeholders credible business cases to justify where their investments, whether their investments will be competitive and where our power market money can best be spent. Now, taking this effort another step forward, in Northwestern Division on the Columbia Basin, we have Asset Investment Excellence Initiative, or AIEI. AIEI brings the three federal Columbia River Power System agencies, that is the Bureau of Reclamation, Bonneville Power Administration, and the Corps, together to implement long-term system-wide planning efforts for a $200 million plus annual hydropower capital program. This initiative began in February of 2015 and has since gained much traction. All right, here's a listing of our NAICS codes for hydropower opportunities. This is a great one to take a photo of. We advertise our opportunities on FedBizOpps, and I know a lot of you look at that to look for opportunities using NAICS codes. So here some of those are for our heavy civil construction opportunities. This includes repairs to powerhouses, structures, and water passages within them. We have opportunities for electrical work and wiring, including work in powerhouses, which have considerable electrical equipment, as well as power generators, transforming, and wiring for the distribution system that makes up the lifeblood of our network. For engineering services, our in-house hydroelectric design center, led by Stephen Miles in Portland, does a majority of our powertrain design, but other engineering services are procured for hydropower work. And for hazardous waste, because many of these projects are more than 50 years old, some use construction materials that are now considered hazardous. We must ensure that these materials are handled carefully and in accordance with regulations, and we will often work with companies who are qualified in this arena. All right, for our small businesses, I would tell you, don't be fooled by the size of the core or the enormity of a lock and dam or power plant. We have considerable success stories with small businesses. These include supplying equipment and rehabilitating cranes, governors, intake gates, bulkheads, and switchgear. Small business set-aside contracts for electrical equipment, welding, roof repairs, and equipment modifications have been great opportunities for a number of companies. And with larger work, we have seen great success with small business contracting opportunities that get incorporated into an awarded contract through the Small Business Contracting Plan. As I mentioned, we have tremendous opportunities in the future. The Corps is committed to a robust plan for investing in our hydropower plants. As you can see, spending projections for the next 3 years total more than $800 million nationwide, and $520 million of that alone is within the Northwestern Division. As each region develops its long-range plans, these investments will continue. There are currently 10 ongoing major rehabilitation projects across the Corps, which includes generator rewinds and/or replacement of turbine runners, and we have 15 more major projects that will start within the next 10 years. There's also a high certainty of increasing large capital investments to modernize the Corps' hydropower fleet in the future. All right, so that was a very quick overview of the tremendous opportunities that we have. I want to thank you all this morning for joining me, and we're going to open up in just a few minutes to hear your questions, and again, want to share question and answers from my panel team here with Ruth Ann Hayter, our Chief of Contracting from Walla Walla, as well as Sean Worthington, who's our Northwestern Division Asset Investment Excellence Initiative Program Manager, and Scott Shelley, who is our Northwestern Division Small Business Representative. I want you to know that you can get your questions answered by us, by our district teams that are here forward, or hope you'll come see us at booth 962 down in the exposition hall. And so once again, want to thank you. And as we take questions and answers, might need some technical help, but we want to continue to automatically scroll through here because we'll have slides that show these, and then get your cameras ready. All right, thank you.
So I get the honor and privilege of asking the first question. Sir is a four-time Corps of Engineer veteran myself in 4 different districts, and the last one in a Civil Works district. We know that the mission load for our nation's infrastructure is significant. And across the Corps, there's a healthy portfolio of project opportunities. Can you describe for us the process or how you determine which projects that you're able to select for your capital reinvestments and repairs? And
Sean?
I'll go ahead and take that. I point to 3 things that are considered in determining which projects are done. One is the condition of the equipment. In hydropower, we use a condition assessment tool called HydroAmp to help us determine the condition of the equipment, and that leads us to the probability of failure. How likely is it to fail? So that's number 1. Number 2, what's the consequence of the failure? Some generator units, for example, have a very high value in generator production, and it's critical for us to know which those are. So those would certainly be a higher priority to rehab or replace if needed. And then another piece would be funding, funding being available, maybe funding constraints by year. And those 3 factors are among the primary ones where the leaders make a decision of what project is going to be done when. There's some others, such as resource constraints, possibly, or coordination with other parallel projects, but those are the primary decision points.
great, thank you. Could you talk to us about your acquisition strategies and best practices in acquisition, please?
I think that one's going to be mine. So most specifically in the Northwestern Division, well, we're trying very hard to get to a standardized acquisition strategy for our large hydropower acquisition replacement efforts. One of those acquisition strategies we recently executed for the McNary turbine replacement, which is a 14 turbine replacement at the McNary Dam in Oregon. And that strategy was for a hybrid contract for a construction with supply, construction install with a supply. that's kind of a new way for the Corps to look at putting a contract together. Sometimes you'll see that we buy the supply separately on a contract, and then we do a construction contract for the installation. But what we find is we increase a significant amount of risk for the Corps when you have two different contractors performing, with the assumption that one did not win both contracts. And so now we're trying to incorporate the supply aspect, the manufacturing of the aspect of the supply needed into the install contract. We keep for those of you that are familiar with our contracts, what we've done is kept the clauses associated with the supply portion of the contract very separate. It's very clear in the solicitation where the supply clauses are and where the construction install clauses are. And so far, we've found that to be a very effective acquisition strategy, bringing one contractor in to purchase or manufacture the supply and then install it. And it has saved us time. We find the quality to be better, and then ultimately the performance of the equipment.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Why don't we, let me run through the slides one more time. So we went through pretty quickly. I'm just going to set this up to scroll through one last time, and then it'll, in case anyone didn't get these opportunities in the future.
Okay, you guys got that?
No, yeah, it'll be timed here. All right, so get your cameras ready.
There will be a quiz afterwards. The doors are locked in the back. Sir, gentlemen, ma'am, we know that market research is a best practice and a requirement, right, for work in the federal government. How do you determine how you split the opportunities between the special concern set-aside categories and the desire or the opportunity to go and advertise an opportunity full and open?
I'll talk about it. Okay. So how do we determine through market research
Yes.
which way we will go in essence?
Right.
Okay, so when we receive a requirement, actually well ahead of it, we have our teams, every district has an acquisition team made up of our program folks, our planners, our contracting officers, and our small business professionals. And to me, they're all involved in market research to the level of knowledge they have. Our planners know, for example, the hydro industry very well. Our small business professionals constantly meet with companies wanting to do business with us, and particularly in this environment. A lot of our small businesses want to be involved in the hydro acquisition process. They're not our turbine manufacturers, for example, but they want to be involved in all of the other NAICS codes that were spelled out in our presentation. As I said, some cases, our market research and our discussions will say, we can set that acquisition aside for a small business, because as a team, we know there are the non-manufacturer rules that say, okay, even though small business doesn't manufacture a transformer, it can be set aside for small business because SBA has said that is waived. So we meet as a team and we very consciously decide whether or not first we have sufficient small business socioeconomic category firms who can do this requirement. If there are, we feel confident we will have our competition and regional pricing, we will set a requirement aside for a socioeconomic firm category. If not, then we also see, how about small business, in 100% small business? And we often do that for a particular requirement. When we cannot, and we have to go unrestricted, then in a similar manner, our team looks at our market research to establish recommended goals for small business and the socioeconomic categories. And we're very conscious as a three-member team to make sure we treat that right.
I'd like to ask one follow-up question to that. We talked about the need to participate in the sources sought. Can you please go over how critical it is for the participants and the attendees today to participate in the sources sought efforts?
So for a contracting officer to make a determination whether they're going to set aside a requirement for small business, we have within the small business rules in FAR Part 19, the rule of 2. So if 2 or more small businesses respond to a sources sought with your capabilities, with whatever we asked for in that sources sought, and they have, then that is given to our technical team members to evaluate what you have provided. If the technical team member or members deemed you to be capable and qualified of performing, if 2 or more are capable and qualified of performing the work, then we are going to set it aside. That's how it works. And so if you don't respond to the sources sought, and I don't get 2 or more, even though there might be 2 or more of you qualified to perform the work, but you just don't respond to the sources sought, you don't leave us in a position to even consider whether we're going to set it aside. We need 2 to set it aside. Now, there are many other things. That's the rule of 2. There are many other things that would be involved in a decision if we didn't get 2 or more. It actually depends on acquisition strategy. But if we're just going to go by the rule of 2, when we do have an acquisition, that we go out with a sources sought to determine, are there small businesses capable of performing the work? We're also trying to determine, is there anybody capable of performing the work? But when we're looking at the rule of 2, we're trying to determine whether or not we can set it aside. So it's really, really important to respond. And I think some of you in the room would say, well, but I never hear anything back when I respond. And I understand that becomes a problem because you don't know whether or not you hit the mark on what it was that you submitted. One of the things, obviously, you can look for is whether or not it ultimately was set aside. If it was, because remember, the sources sought is not a solicitation, it's just for us to determine, one of the things we're going to determine is whether we're going to set it aside. So you could determine on FedBizOps whether that acquisition ultimately did get set aside, but don't hesitate to touch base with the small business coordinator at each one of the districts, the small business specialist, because they can go and ask anybody on the contracting team, well, what happened there? How'd they do? What did their package look like? What was the feedback on their package? The contract specialist or the contracting officer may not be able to get back with you, but a small business specialist can absolutely sit down with you and talk to you about that. So don't hesitate to reach out to them. They're all at our booth right now. You can get their cards, and then you can keep an ongoing dialogue with them when you are responding to sources sought.
Do you mind if I add one? I'd like to add one thought to that. We get a lot of comments that there are so many sources sought, companies just don't have time to answer them, but they really are critical. We have had a few cases where companies, I just didn't get time to get to it and the time's passed. A lot of companies feel these sources sought are like solicitations, and if you don't get your response in by the time we ask, it's too late. It's like you can't bid or something. It's not the case. If you get it in a day late and we haven't done our analysis, we will take your input. We don't want companies thinking that date is like a solicitation. Too late, if you don't get it in, we're not going to consider what you said, because we know that there's so many of these out there, but we really do want to hear from small businesses, and as long as we haven't totally processed it and made our decisions, I think we will take that input, or the person you're writing to will take it and get it into the system and look at it.
Thank you. Can you talk to us about when the Corps issues a solicitation and you make the decision to go unrestricted, right? As you go through your process as an unrestricted negotiation acquisition, how do we find out, or how do we know what small business opportunities might be available within the acquisition?
Shall I start that?
Go ahead.
Okay. I mentioned earlier that we very carefully, well, first let me say, it's not uncommon in hydropower that our unrestricted acquisitions are going to be best value trade-off. You won't see seal bid or lowest price technically acceptable in most of these, because it's important we have all these factors. But For subcontracting, where there will be small business, there is now a really important factor called small business participation. And it's a technical factor, it's not a non-technical factor. And it'll be listed along with all the other factors. In the process of putting that factor in, we also, as I mentioned earlier, will come up with how the Corps, through our experience, by looking at our past contracts, our market research, we will come up with recommended small business goals for both small business and socioeconomic. And we put those in the solicitation along with the factor, small business participation. And that is evaluated just like any other factor. If a company meets the minimum goals we say, they'll be evaluated as such. And if they put greater achievements for that factor, it will be evaluated as that along with all the other factors. And so you won't see all of the small business opportunities spelled out in there. You just have to work with the prime you're working, say, where they want you providing a proposal. But also in that proposal will come things like commitment documents and so forth, so that when we eventually do award a contract, our contracting professionals very carefully make sure subcontracting plans are aligned with the proposals companies submitted. They don't say one thing and then not provide it in the ultimate approved subcontracting plan. So that's the process we use to make sure small business can see their subcontracting opportunities.
Thank you.
And I would also tell you that if you're not currently working with the large hydro manufacturers and within this industry, there are about 5 or 6. It's a very specialized industry, as you well know, and they almost always self-perform, but there are many opportunities for small businesses. As Scott said, we've got that small business participation factor in the best value trade-off acquisitions, and then ultimately that turns into a subcontracting plan. But how do you find out about these subcontracting opportunities that you might be interested in? Well, I would encourage you to go to the industry days at the districts. Because the large business prime contractors for hydropower go to those meetings. They're looking to meet with you and talk with you and understand what you provide. What normally does get on a subcontracting plan in a large hydro acquisition, you're going to find that hardly anybody, the primes in this industry, will work the asbestos or any of the hazmat removal. So they're either looking to subcontract that out, or they also are looking for transportation. They're looking for, that's another thing, they'll hire small businesses for their transportation needs if they've got the supply portion of a contract that they're going to be delivering the, whatever it is that we're going to be installing. So those are 2 key ones. Another one is painting is sometimes also subcontracted out, and those would be some of the key ones. And we also had those in our slides, that they seem to be a pretty standard group of subcontracting opportunities within the hydropower industry, but that the industry days is where you're going to make those connections with those major primes who work in this field, where they're looking to establish relationships with subcontractors. And then all of these industries have now figured out, because we do have the subcontracting, or we have the small business participation plan factor, they have established a small business subcontracting manager, if you will, within their companies. And I know they're all out looking and working hard to increase the pool of small businesses that they can work with for their subcontracting opportunities.
Thank you. One quick follow-up. Can you talk a little bit about the feature in Fed BizOps that many of our attendees here today can click and use to advertise themselves as a potential small business asset to the large businesses?
Right. So when you see an opportunity on Fed BizOps and you want to be considered, you can, as a subcontractor, you know, for a major hydro acquisition or any acquisition that you want to be considered for it, you can identify yourself as an interested party, and so we can see that that you've identified yourself, then we can do research on whether or not you've got the capabilities. Contractors can do the same, so you can have that opportunity to let them know that you're interested. But again, I really encourage you to participate in district industry days, especially in the Northwestern Division. We all have a pretty standard practice of bringing you in as well as the large primes, and it's not where you set up booths, it's where you have this opportunity to meet one-on-one with them. There's plenty of time to meet with primes to start to establish relationships.
Great, thank you so much. Follow-up to a previous question. Oh, sorry, please, Maureen?
So Walla Walla just had theirs. We do ours in October almost every year, so you could put a tickler in your systems to know that ours usually happens in October. Portland's is going to be in November 14th. Seattle's is working for a January date, but it hasn't been set yet. Kansas City and Omaha, Omaha runs a bigger event that I believe is 2 days. And then Gwendy, do you have any dates? June for Kansas City. Perfect. So stop by the booth and grab our booklet that has all the industry days. Thank you, Colonel Dorff. That you can also potentially participate in.
And even though we have our booklet, all the other divisions, even though we have the major part of the hydro, other divisions also have days that you could look at which ones we said had the greater amounts, South Atlantic or whatever, and visit them also. Question out there.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
And I was just going to say, a really good example of a recent industry day link-up, if you will, through networking, I was there, and a large hydro company that I had never heard of, which just, I'm like, what? And they were there, and they're working with one of our smalls that we work with in our district, and I'm like, come in, give us a capability brief. Set up a time where we can put a team together so you can come and tell us about what you do, because we're not familiar with you. And the other thing I did was my own market research and got a hold of the Hydroelectric Design Center people to find out, were they familiar with them? Had they worked with them before? So those industry days really give you an opportunity to also ask for it to come in and give a capability brief. I want to know who you are. My staff wants to know who you are. Our PMs want to know who you are. Our technical team want to know who you are. So if you can build that into your budgets, the capability briefs, I think, are another good way for you to let us know who you are, and for us to also share with you that we know of other subcontracting opportunities that might be available to you.
And I'll just add, in the asset investment initiatives, acquisition has been a focus on that. And speaking of these industry days, one of the purposes in acquisition that we have focused on is increasing competition and having more companies being able to bid, be a part of the acquisition. So that's just following what Ruth Ann just said. If you're able to come to the industry days and be a part of it, it's part of what we're looking for.
We've got a question back here, ma'am, please.
Hi there. Maybe I'm missing something, and maybe you said this. I'm just curious, though. I don't see any of the permitting and compliance components written into this. So are all of these dollar amounts for these particular projects also including environmental, any sort of NEPA, cultural, historic preservation kinds of things?
So in some of these, the environmental work is done in-house, with our own staff. And if it's going to be contracted out, it is not included in the ones that I know that Walla Walla put together. So that would be, a separate contract that's feeding this. This is actually for hydropower, the actual hydropower acquisition itself, or the components, whatever it is that we're buying and or installing.
Sir.
Good morning. Paul Keys from Alliant Technologies. We do SCADA control systems work and industrial cyber. So one of the challenges I face when I'm looking at some of the hydro projects is I know I've got to work with the large general contractors. I've got to be able to connect with them. But until a draft RFP drops or you start doing market research, it's very difficult for me to look at the projects and identify which projects can actually require the services that we provide. So is there any way for us to kind of get ahead of that so we can kind of build that into our pipeline and be ready to respond to those?
I'll make a comment, but Steve, you can add to it. Steve's leader of the Hydroelectric Design Center, and I know that they have a sheet that's at our booth that shows some of the future work that's coming down the pipe. And that's coming from some of the system asset plans. It's part of this asset investment that we were talking about earlier. So you can, some of that information is available at our booth, future projects. Steve, if you'd like to add anything, you can.
Yep, which is Steve Miles with HDC. So we have this handout here, and I have it today. But I would also kind of like what Ruth Ann said, in this industry is getting to know us a little bit. And in fact, just an example there, we do have a government-owned SCADA system that we use in parts of the country, but in other parts of the country, they're still having a private system installed. So the Nashville district just had a request for a proposal for a vendor to come in through competition for a new SCADA system on the Cumberland River system. So it's an example. So to get ahead so you can start thinking, because that about to prepare for that is getting to know us and the HDC, the Hydroelectric Design Center, because it's hard to know what's going on across the whole nation. But we do have, this document here gives the best assessment of what's going on across the nation in the hydropower industry for our fleet, what's coming up, 3 years out. 3 years out. And so we have copies of that here. But we're in Portland, Oregon, the Hydroelectric Design Center. We're under the Northwestern Division structure, but we work across all 75 power plants in the nation. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I've got a quick follow-up. We were talking before about subcontracting plans, right? Okay. So in the life cycle, right, we've discussed where our small businesses can advertise their opportunities, right, their capabilities and skill sets, and partner with large businesses, right? We've talked about the requirement to submit small business and subcontracting plans. Can you talk a little bit about how the Corps then ensures that those are actually executed during the course of the contract?
So within the federal government, we have a system called ESRS. It's an electronic subcontracting reporting system. And the prime is responsible for submitting on a semi-annual basis their dollars that they have obligated against their subcontracting plan by small business subcategory. Those reports come to the contracting officer of record for that contract. That contracting officer then gets a notice that they have a subcontracting plan report. They go in, they have to review the report. The report is set up, if you're not familiar, you submit, if you've done this, you submit your numbers by the subcategory against what you said and your goal and then what you've actually done, so it shows us the goal and the actuals. And the contracting officer has to approve it. It has to say you're doing what you said you were going to do. And so I get those on a regular basis, and I can tell you that if they're not meeting their subcontracting plan, then I don't approve them. I send them back denied, and I tell them, this isn't working. You need to give me a better plan for how you're going to reach the goals that you committed to in your subcontracting plan. So I'm monitoring that twice a year, as do all contracting officers who are the awarding contracting officers on a contract that does have a subcontracting plan. I will also tell you that I've had very good luck with my contractors who aren't meeting the goal, the major goal, or one of their subcategories. Their person in charge of that will call and say, we're having a really hard time. Can you help us? Can you help us? And who do I turn to? I turn to my small business specialist, and I say, hey, they need some help here with subcontractors that do this kind of work in this area. And a perfect example of that in the Walla Walla district recently was a roof repair, and we gave the prime multiple subcontractors in the area that could do that kind of work. And they, in fact, hired a local Walla Walla firm as their subcontractor. Not Hydro, but a very good example of how to get after a subcontracting plan and the goals that you committed to as a prime when you got that contract.
And I'd like to add to that.
Yep.
That also on meeting their subcontracting goals goes into a consideration
Very good point.
for future contracts. So we are getting better in our post-administration to see that subcontractors do see the work if they're signed up and they are checked on that semi-annual basis.
That's right. Evaluation of past performance has to be accomplished in these best value trade-off acquisitions. And just so you're aware, USACE, as part of our evaluation of our small business program now, Mr. Marks at the Army put in our evaluation, are we correctly accomplishing and ensuring large businesses submit correctly these subcontracting reports? And so part of our performance is, are we correctly making sure that happens as it should?
And I'll add from a higher level standpoint, some improvements. Back in 2016, there was a federal hydropower summit where USACE leaders and Power Marketing Authority leaders got together and identified some challenges in hydropower acquisition, delays in getting some of the work done, and lost generation, lost revenue. So a team got together and looked at ways that this can be improved, and lots of recommendations came forward. But one that has been done is a class that was set up to bring together operations, project management, engineering, contracting, thank you, all together in a single class to talk about hydro acquisition and ways we can improve it and do it consistently. And we've already had a class. We had one in Nashville last June. We have 2 more lined up next year, but this is another approach that we have going forward to help improve execution of future projects.
We talked about supply and service opportunities. We mentioned some of the ones like asbestos and painting before. Are there any other ones that we have seen habitually or that you think that are going to come up in the near future?
Sometimes construction has to be changed, doesn't it? Yeah. Some concrete and everything. Construction too.
Those are really the key ones, and I would say that transportation is another one. Scaffolding, maybe they're going to hire subcontractors to bring the scaffolding in if we're going to have to put, a floor down to protect the floor within the hydropower facilities that we're working in. Potentially, building something that would be able to put the elements of the equipment on as we're taking it apart. There's those types of things that I think would be the ones that you'd most likely see if it's going to be large hydro. But keep in mind, the Northwestern Division is the biggest user of the large hydro companies. The other districts who have hydropower have much smaller requirements that they actually put out for small businesses. So when you see some of the ones that we're scrolling on the screen, there's definitely small business potential for the smaller units, for smaller businesses to get involved there.
Great, thank you so much. Can you talk to me finally about what tools are available for us beyond this conference? We talked about industry days a second ago, but what other assets and platforms for information can we go to get to continue the conversation that we've started here today?
Well, in addition to SAMI and the industry days, I know that a lot of our small business professionals across the Corps are constantly out in other industry events. Like, I can just think one I'm familiar with in Tacoma, Washington. There's a huge annual event where all kinds of agencies come there, and it's a huge small business outreach event. I think they call it Alliance Northwest or something. Our folks try to be involved in all of those joint events also, and are constantly looking for small businesses that want to do business with us. And I'm confident they use what they receive there as their market research efforts when it comes to projects and when they're interacting with our program managers and contractors. Say that they use the data they receive here and at those events to supplement our market research.
Oh, sorry, sir, I forgot about you.
No, that's no problem. Good morning. It's an honor to address all of you. I feel at home. Let me explain. U.S. Army, retired, in the field of counterintelligence for 15 years. Just finished my graduate degree where I was a federal scholar fellow with the U.S. Department of Energy. They tried to grab a hold of me. I politely turned them down, came back home to the Northwest. So I feel at home here. Opened up the paper one morning and there was a job announcement. So this was totally unplanned, but I ended up landing a management position with Siemens there in Bellevue, Washington. So for all the small businesses, particularly in the Northwest, we have launched a brand new initiative, which is nationwide, where we're focused on two things: giving more to small business with an additional focus on veteran enterprise. So those transitioning veterans that are coming back into the workforce, we have a specific push and focus for FY19 and 20 to do that for anyone who's in the room. Now, I have a strategy question. Serving as a federal strategist for the DOE, now coming back to the Seattle area, here's my question. And I'll preface it by, it was never mentioned in the presentation this morning, but I am interested to see from a thought perspective, what is happening? Is there any conversation going on within the Army Corps relative to digitalization? That is, a lot of utilities are out there preparing, ramping up to enter into Industry 4.0, or what we like to call the Internet of Things. What will the Army Corps do to address those dams in our home, in which I was born and raised, to elevate it and bring it into the 21st century? I'll stop right there.
Great. Hey, that's a great question. I'm going to, one of the things that we saw the presentation on innovation and the Internet of Things. One of the other side of that is security with it, that we want a closed system that can't be hacked into. So we have our own GDAX system, is our SCADA system to control our dams. I would actually ask for Steve Miles if he'd like to comment on some of the innovation that we're taking here.
Thanks, General. Great question. And I think in a lot of cases we have and we are digitizing our fleet. We're well on the journey. We have a lot of private systems that are digital. We have digital excitation, digital governors. We have complex control systems. And like the General said, we are under the Department of Defense, so keeping these systems very safe and all of the procedures under FERC and NERC, and also reliability and compliance. So we have an enclave, but it is, I know Siemens has a great digital technology platform. And so I think as we move forward together, you know, with Siemens and other folks that are in the room that do digital technology and in the Corps of Engineers, is how can we partner together to move our fleet in that direction? We have 75 power plants. And so I encourage you to keep engaging us in where can we add Siemens systems or other systems to run our fleet. Because what's really exciting going on right now is, even in this industry of hydroelectric energy, there's markets, new organized markets that are developing, like literally today. One of those markets is called the energy imbalance market, which Bonneville Power Administration is very interested in entering. And so digital technology, the accuracy of our data within our fleet is so important. So I really appreciate your interest in this. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from the field? One back here.
Okay, so this is more of a nuts and bolts, I guess, question for a lot of the folks that are here. I attended the industry day for Stony Gate back, I guess it was back earlier this summer. And you know, you talk about the kind of the annual industry days, and those are great to attend. But I would also like to recommend that if there's a job or a project where they're actually having an industry day, you can also talk to people there. But you know, that was a great industry day. Got to talk to a lot of people, And the neat thing was, you kind of got to go into the guts of the lock and dam. And, you know, this is one that followed the Panama Canal. I guess a lot of the people that built the Panama Canal came up and built that particular system. But for the contractors that haven't really done a lot of work with the USACE, can you talk a little bit about, like, for those industry days, some of the requirements like safety gear that you're supposed to bring and just the things that you need to be prepared for?
So if we're going to offer an opportunity to go to one of the sites, whether it's a site visit, whether it's a pre-proposal conference that happens to be at the site, the announcement for that will list out all the things that are necessary. The one thing I would encourage you to keep very close in mind, because it gets us a lot, is if you are going to bring foreign nationals with you. And so if you're going to have a foreign national, we have a very stringent guideline for the timelines that it takes us to get the approval for that person to be able to enter the facilities. And so foreign national will be laid out how you have to identify them and request that they be given access. So that's one. But the safety aspects of it will be listed, whether or not you need, you know, closed-toed shoes, safety glasses. Many times, depending on what it is, if it's a small enough facility, those will be made available, not the shoes, but obviously the safety, the helmet, you know, all of the things you would think about going into a live industrial site, you know, would be called out, and so those would be necessary. I do want to follow up, though, on your question previously that you asked about how do we find out about these things. Another initiative tied to what Sean talked to is we're trying hard on the hydro to put not a pre-proposal conference or a draft RFP. This is pre that. We're trying hard in the big hydro to give industry a look at the 90% design. And that's what we are calling a best practice within the Northwest Division, is to get a 90% design out there for you to look at. And then many of you will say, well, yeah, but I don't want to provide my comments on what I see there because, you know, I'm giving away some of my own industry key information. We give each of you the opportunity to come in at a specific time to sit down with the design team and talk about what you see in that 90% design. That proved to be huge on the McNary turbines. It caused us to completely rethink our bid schedule. It caused us to make several significant changes to the actual specifications of the package, the feedback we got from industry. So if you see that we're going to offer a 90% design and we put it out there for you to look at and give comment, know that we're not going to ask you to make those comments out for everybody. You're going to get that one-on-one with the team. But that's another way for you to see, you know, some information well in advance of what it is that we might be putting out there.
Super. I'm going to give the panelists one last chance. If there's anything that you guys want to highlight that we didn't ask, you didn't get the opportunity to talk about today, that's near and dear to your heart, or is the difference between victory and defeat for you guys in the coming years in the hydropower arena for the mighty Army Corps of Engineers?
Okay.
A couple of quick things. Best practices. On a best value trade-off, what we're doing almost on everyone out of Walla Walla District now is the technical factor and the past performance factor are equal in performance. Why are we doing that? Because we absolutely need an offerer who wins a contract to perform to the specifications of the contract, to deliver on time, to have it be good quality. And so past performance has not had that relative importance previously, and now it does. So that's one key thing. For you as a subcontractor on past performance, I highly encourage you, if you have staff working at the projects as a subcontractor, whether it's asbestos, transportation, you name it, whatever you're doing, make sure you know who the government quality assurance rep is, that they know who you are, that they know who your company is, that they know that you're a subcontractor. If you're performing well on that contract and that you have a relationship with them, you can ask that when they do their assessing official past performance report, to call out that the subcontractor company name performed this work and did an excellent job. You can absolutely ask for yourselves to be called out in those CPARS reports. So don't lose sight of that opportunity there for you to get, even when you're not, the CPARS isn't written against you. It's written against the prime, but you have an opportunity to get your information in there. So past performance equal to technical on best value trade-offs is a pretty significant change. Asking for your company to be called out in a CPARS past performance is also important. Those are some key things that I wanted to make sure that we talked about, so that you know that we are working hard to improve our hydropower acquisition, and how we're doing it, how quickly we do it, and then how well you perform.
Mr. Worthington, sir.
I mentioned that there's some high-level acquisition improvements, and I'll even mention a couple years ago, it was in Walla Walla, there was an industry day where we met with contractors to ask them ways that we can improve acquisition, and there was even a small business representative. So we have some actions in place to keep getting better and better, but if any of you have some acquisition comments that could help us do things better, I think any of us here on the panel here would be happy to hear. We have initiatives to keep improving, but we would like to know where things can be improved as well.
Mr. Shelley, sir.
I'm okay.
Okay, that's complete, sir.
Yeah, I just like to say is, my last comment here, that the strength of our nation and the strength of the Corps of Engineers is industry. So thank you all for your partnership with the Corps. We absolutely depend on you and want to continue to work and partner with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, over the last hour, our distinguished panelists have shared with us information on the Corps' hydropower program, its history, its opportunities, tips and techniques and best practices so we can optimize our own business opportunities and capabilities to support our nation's infrastructure and security. Please make sure that you stop by all of the division booths, including the ones for the Northwest Division, the Lakes and Rivers Division, the Mississippi Valley Division. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I have one last request. Can we please get a round of applause for our panelists today?